So welcome back, guys. I'm so excited because I'm about to be chatting with Ricardo Rolo, who is a friend of mine. And actually, we originally met on Instagram, which was super fun. But he is a fabulous realtor and he focuses on first-time home buyers. So thank you so much for being here.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so when I've been talking to millennials, everybody's like, oh, the realtor is like their hero who is going to guide them to home ownership. So I'm super excited because I got quite a few questions for you that I want to get your perspective on. So first of all, when you're working with a first-time home buyer, what happens at the beginning of the relationship? Like in an ideal scenario, what kind of things would you talk about? How does the relationship really start out to ensure that it's like super smooth and everybody knows what to expect?
Right, so it has to start off pretty casual. And the way that I start off is when either I obtain a lead or someone refers me, I call them up, get some general information, say we're going to meet up, very casual, at a coffee place that they choose close to them. So they're not intimidated in any way, and we just end up meeting for coffee and pretty much like this, just chatting back and forth.
Chit-chatting, know what you're all about.
Pretty much, it goes both ways.
Both ways, okay.
Yeah, so they know about me, but the main point is for me to listen to their needs.
Okay.
And I feel like a lot of realtors don't listen. They just like to talk and tell them what they like. So really, it comes down to listening and probing and asking open-ended questions, and then phoning down to specific questions, just to understand their needs.
And then I really like that.
Keeping it pretty casual with millennials because I'm dressed pretty formal right now, but even millennials, they like it to keep it really casual.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, and I think that's really good because I've seen sometimes it's like, okay, let's go out, let's go house hunting. But I think it's really important to be able to have some dialogue and conversation before sort of diving into the business aspect of it. And so I'm assuming you're kind of asking them about like what they're looking for in their lifestyle, what they're looking for in a place. How often do you find that there is a disconnect between what people are looking for and what's out there in the market? Are people like, oh, I want $300,000 for like a fancy downtown place? Like, how are you finding that?
All the time, especially with millennials.
Yeah.
They have a budget, they're usually coming out of school, and with a good job, they say I'm making 70, 80, even sometimes over 100,000.
Yeah.
And just their expectations of what they think they can qualify for, especially in this hot market, it's nowhere near what they can qualify for. So one thing, you have to understand their needs, where they are, where they're going to move along, what they're looking for, to gear them not only into the place that's right for them today, but if they're planning to stay long term, especially if they're focused on an area, that's going to allow them to grow.
Yeah.
And with a millennial, you really have to bring them down and tell them right off the bat, or else you're lying to them, because you could go up to a realtor and any realtor is going to tell you, give me let's say downtown Toronto, give me a 2-bedroom under 400,000 right in the core. And a lot of realtors are gonna, just to get the business, they're gonna be like, okay, I'll find it for you. And if you mislead your clients right off the bat, I mean, they're gonna lose that trust in you.
Yeah.
So eventually, so it saves a lot of time and headache if you tell them up front what they're able to expect and take them on a few properties and show them pretty much this is where the price range is at. You can't quite qualify for this, but let's get you into a place that fits your needs, and eventually you can grow into that.
I like that. And one thing actually that you touched on before is, the client comes to you and they're like, oh, this is what I'm pre-approved for. Do you ever get people coming to you before they've been pre-approved and it's like your next action to like scoot them off to get a pre-approval, sort of a license to shop, as I like to call it?
Yeah. So I would say more than 50% already have a pre-approval.
Okay.
So I think that millennials are more savvy. They go online, they read certain things. Not a lot of information, so it's a good thing what you're doing to put the whole package together.
We're seeing you together here.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they know pretty much. They know specific things, and they speak with their banker and they get some information.
Yeah.
Not a full pre-approval, but they know more or less what they qualify for. So I would say over 50%, they already know more or less a range where they're in. The ones that don't know, I have mortgage background, that's pretty easy. I can give them more or less a range, just based on a couple of questions, what they can generally qualify for, and go from there. But yeah, it's good to know exactly what you qualify for, so so I'm showing you the the appropriate properties in the range that you're looking for.
Yeah, I know. I appreciate that. That makes sense. Now, in the beginning, chatter and conversation and getting to know them, how much time or how do you outline the role of the realtor? How would you explain it? Because from my conversations, there's sort of a sentiment of like, oh, I've got a realtor, they are going to guide me through the entire process. And your job or your function, obviously, is a huge part in buying a property, but it's not everything soup to nuts. So how do you explain, or do you explain your role so that people know kind of what to expect a little more?
Certainly, and I mean, when we have the conversation that we sit down for coffee, I let them know exactly what my specialties are. Now, because you're the main point of contact when you purchase a home, they're going to come with you with a lot of questions. So you do have to wear a lot of hats, and you're going to answer, you know, the specific general questions. If it comes to tax, yes, I know it, but am I a lawyer? No, I'm going to guide you to the right person. So you really need a whole bunch of professionals. Now, because as a realtor, you're the main point of contact, they're going to come with you with a lot of information, such as what are the rents here, what's the investments, what's a good area, what's the macroeconomic factors. So a good realtor
really have to know.
A good realtor really has to know their numbers, and I mean, it comes from viewing a lot of properties and just being active as a full-time realtor. But I let them know exactly where my focus is, which is pretty much finding them the best property for the best value, and then negotiating the hell out of it to get them a good deal.
I like that, negotiating the hell out of it. I want to hear more realtors saying that.
Yeah, that's pretty much where I'm going to provide the most value for the client.
Yeah, yeah, and you touched on a couple interesting points here. One, having the realtor ensure they know what's going on in the market and trends. Do you do a lot of research? Like, how do you stay up to date? Not to put you on the spot here, but...
Right, so the company that I work with, really, if you want to be a professional, you have to focus on one specific area.
Got it.
So if you're dealing, let's say downtown Toronto, and you're active in that market, so you're aware of every listing that comes on the market, and you preview, which is once the home comes on, before you show your clients the properties, you're actively looking at all the properties that become available.
Hold on a second. You actually go to take a look at the property before you take your client to see the property?
Yeah, you have to. I mean, if they
All right, hold on a second here. This is what a first-class realtor really does.
Yeah, most people don't do that. But then again, it does two things. One, it allows me as a professional to keep up to date and know exactly what's on the market. So when it sells, I know exactly if another similar one comes on, I know the value right there. So it keeps you in the market, it keeps you a professional, and you know more or less where the market is and where the value's at. So if you have a client that comes to you and they're saying, I want to see that property, but this is what I want, right off the bat, you're not going to waste that time and take them to that property because you know that's not for them. So you're going to take them to one that's going to fit their needs, and if you're familiar with a particular area as a professional, you're going to help them out, you're going to save them a lot of time.
I think that's absolutely fantastic, and that's where you really start to prove your value, because one of the things we're going to talk about is do you even need a realtor and kind of the benefits, because I know that you can actually purchase a property without a realtor, but I think, you know, unfortunately, like you said, there's maybe good realtors, mediocre realtors, and then there's great realtors. And if you're going to work with a great one, it's absolutely worth your while and the benefit of doing
For sure. I mean, because they know all the specifics, and even though you think you may want to buy in a particular area, you may not know exactly the history or what's selling or what's available or other options that may be available to you.
Yeah.
So sometimes as millennials, the issue is that they get very emotional. And they decide,
we do not get emotional.
They use a lot of emotion. Well, us as millennials, what we do
Give me that in the nicest way possible.
I mean, if you want to overpay, you can, but I'm going to tell you exactly where the value, the market value is, and if you plan on staying long term, it may turn out okay, but I'm going to give you that professional opinion. Now, we're talking about purchasing. Certainly, there's 3 ways that you could purchase a home.
Okay.
The first option would be you could buy it on your own if you know the person's selling it. You
like
just
a private buyer,
private buyer, private seller. You just pretty much do it through the lawyer. That's very rare. I mean, if you're in a particular, let's say if you're renting in a condo and you know someone selling next door, you already know the unit. That may make sense.
So I think it may be rare in some of the larger cities. We definitely have people here right across Canada, especially if the market's a little bit slower and people are really trying to recover, you know, the investment they put in. I've definitely seen a lot more private selling in other parts of the country. But yeah,
Sure,
definitely
yeah.
in some of the bigger cities.
Especially with the market, if the market does continue changing and it moves into a buyer market like we had, or higher interest rates, then it's going to become certainly more common.
Yeah.
And in the smaller towns where real estate doesn't flip so much, yeah, it's more common. So that's the first option, you represent yourself. Second option would be that you just walk into an open house and you meet the listing agent and they represent you. Now, they also have a fiduciary responsibility to represent the seller. So even though you think if you go directly to the listing agent, you may get a deal because they're going to get paid on both ends, which I know we'll probably get to.
Yes, we will.
They have a fiduciary responsibility not to.
So sorry, what does that mean, a fiduciary responsibility?
Well, it's pretty much when you sign a contract, either to represent the buyer or the seller.
Okay.
We have to act in a professional conduct as we were acting for ourselves. So we have to protect your most interests. So it's the same thing as a lawyer, an accountant representing you. It comes with the same benefits.
So does that mean they have a primary, maybe I'm using the wrong word, but like a primary responsibility to the person they had a contract with, and then you're just a secondary person, so they're not going to do anything unethical, but their primary
responsibility is to get the most money for the seller.
To get the most, okay, so we're going to get back to double-ending deals,
right.
Definitely. Okay, that was number two.
That's number two.
Okay.
And the third one would be pretty much having a buyer representative agent, such as myself or anyone representing buyers. They're strictly focused, and now if you sign a contract with a buyer representative agent, what you do is, regardless of the three options that you do, you don't pay anything out of pocket, but now the agent has a fiduciary responsibility to help you, as opposed to helping the seller. So you have those three options, and you can weigh which one makes more sense. Obviously, if you have an awesome realtor, coaching you and knowing the market, and it's going to represent you to the fullest, it's good to have that on your side, and you pay $0 out of pocket.
Yeah, we are going to talk about that fee as well. I didn't get that it doesn't come out of your pocket technically, but you mentioned buyer's representation agreement, which was the next thing that I was going to get to. Okay. So like perfect segue right here. No, it's perfect. So that is an agreement that let me ask you to explain it. How would you explain a buyer's representation agreement, and kind of when in the relationship do you present that to your client?
Well, when we meet, and if we decide that we want to take it further, I let them know exactly.
If we're going to go steady?
Yeah, if we're going to go steady. It's pretty much making the relationship firm. It is a contract, it's a legal contract, and it protects the realtor's interests, because as a realtor, we get paid only when a deal closes. And if we're showing you property and you're going to put an offer on the property, we want to make sure that we're protected and we're getting paid for all the work that we do.
Right. So it's not like if you show me 25 houses and I find one privately, you would still get commission for it, right?
If you see one privately, within the relationship, within the time frame, even if you find something private, because the buyer representation agent is representing your needs, you would have to bring it to their attention.
Got it.
Because they have to represent you in any properties, even if you find it yourself.
Okay, so it's kind of like I'm going to be loyal to you and you're going to be in faith loyal to me in terms of showing me lots of different properties, and then in return, when I buy the property in that time period, it's going to be through you.
Yeah, when and if. You're not required to purchase anything, so it doesn't require you to purchase, but it's just committing you to the realtor that if they're doing a lot of work for you, if you're going to close, they're pretty much going to get paid on it.
Yeah.
And just so a buyer knows, if you sign one of those and you try to be sneaky and you go behind, let's say, your agent, and you decide to use another agent, you don't tell the agent that you have the buyer representation with, they legally can come after you and they're able to get paid. So make sure you're aware of that. Make sure you know what you're getting into.
Yeah.
It's not a scary thing. It's still a contract. It's just
how long is a buyer's representation agreement typically for that you see in the marketplace?
In the market, I would say most of them is about 90 days. Now it's flexible.
Yeah. Now I will tell you that I have seen, especially with newer agents, have a buyer's representation agreement in there. It says for a year.
Right.
I feel like that's a little too pushy.
That's too long. Anything over 6 months, they would need to get you to sign off on it.
Okay.
Now, just so you know, a buyer's representation agreement, the reason I normally put 90 days is I have to assess exactly what type of property that the client is looking for. If it's a specific property that not a lot are available, I'll generally extend the buyer's representation period, because I know it's going to take some time.
A specific kind of penthouse with a swimming pool, yada yada.
Yes, I would normally extend it because I know those properties don't become available as much.
Right.
Now,
is the buyer's representation agreement with you specifically, or is it with your brokerage that you're affiliated with?
Well, it would be with the brokerage, it would be the broker. You're representing the brokerage, but as the agent, you would be the agent representing them.
Got it. Okay. Now, what happens if I sign with you? You're going to help me find a place, and then like, I don't know, we don't really get along, you don't like me, maybe our personalities clash or something like that. For that reason, is it possible to get out of a buyer's representation agreement, or, you know, is it like ironclad, there's nothing you can do?
No, it's fully open. It's, for whatever reason, if you're not happy with your realtor, you can break a buyer's representation agreement, especially because sometimes you start off and, like you said, you find out you're not the right match, or sometimes the agent isn't doing the work. You know, because a lot of realtors talk a lot of talk, but they don't. So they say they're going to show you the properties, and then they're not really showing you what you want to see. So you can break that. I would suggest certainly get it in writing, break the contract, and then move on to a different realtor. That's going to protect yourself, and it's going to save you some time.
Yeah, but I like that in terms of like being totally honest, totally transparent. And, you know, let's be honest, there's people in the industry who can be a little bit pushy, and, you know, they can maybe even be a little bit challenging if you want to break it. But I know that one of the things, or it's my understanding, so jump in, is if, let's say, for example, I'm working with a realtor, they're being really difficult, they don't allow me or they don't want me to cancel it, I can actually call the brokerage directly, and they can either connect me with somebody else, or they can help me to modify that. Is that what you're...
Yeah, they're able to do that. I've never had that. I've never had an individual break. It's expired if I can't find, and sometimes I renew, sometimes they decide they want to wait.
Yeah.
But certainly, if the agent's not going to sign it for you, you can certainly go to their brokerage and look at other means. You could also speak with the Real Estate Council of Ontario if there's any other issues,
or if you're dealing,
or if you're dealing with a different agent, they can assist you in the process to take.
Yeah. Okay.
It's pretty straightforward of getting
getting
out of one.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if like you're in a tough situation and it's really not working, like you're not actually stuck.
Yeah. Don't waste any more time. Just
there you go. Let's get you to the home of your dreams, right?
Yeah,
okay.
Sure.
So now we know we're going steady. We've got a contract. Does anyone say that anymore? Going steady?
I don't know. It's kind of outdated.
It really is outdated.
For millennials, at least.
It's true. Okay. So now we know that we are working together, and what is sort of the next step? Are you going to start taking me to look at houses, like, or properties? Well, obviously we know now that you're going to be previewing them.
Right.
So what happens next?
So based on their criteria looking for, what we do is we analyze the market, and as a professional, as I indicated, you already know everything that's on the market. You're looking daily. If the client really has to move within tight time frames, you want a realtor to look at the market, what's becoming available 2 to 3 times a day at least, because some properties are posted in the morning, and if it's a really good deal, they're going to sell within that day. So you want to be prepared, especially in a hot market, that you're always looking at the market, you're keeping updated, whatever becomes available. If that applies to the client, you're out there at least previewing it and make sure it's for them, and that night take the client right away.
So there are times where things go really, really quickly.
Yeah, the best deals don't last on the market, you know. They usually sell the same day or within the first few days that they're on the market.
Yeah.
So
definitely in some of the hotter markets across Canada.
Definitely, yeah. So the best to save a client's time is firstly understanding their needs. Once you know exactly what they're looking for, you scour the market and you pretty much compile. What I do is I compile maybe 15 to 20 properties that may fit their needs, and I send them to the clients with all the pictures, and a lot of them are already seen, and I indicate exactly, this one will be your fit, this is the positives, this is the negatives.
And do the pictures ever not look like the property?
A lot of them, and I mean, it tricks a lot of millennials because they usually just want to see the ones, you know, that have the pretty pictures, and they don't look at the ones with the ugly pictures, but that's where the previewing comes, where if you've seen that property and you know, and a lot of other agents aren't going to see it for exactly that same reason, there's opportunity there. So that's where
right in there.
That's where the opportunity comes. So you send them a bunch of pictures, you say, out of these, which ones, because you don't, there's a small percentage of clients that are going to tell you, I want to see all 20. You know what I mean? And if they want to see all 20, I'm going to show them all 20. They're going to get tired out.
Do you have an average of how many properties you show before someone buys? I mean, it's just completely arbitrary. You might take me in the first one I love.
It depends. It depends. Yeah, some people, it's rare that they buy in the first one, and it's rare that it takes 100 properties. I mean, if it takes 100 properties for the client, to show a client for them to purchase something, I think you're not doing your job, or the client isn't really serious. Because every time you show them a property, you're pretty much narrowing what they like, what they don't like. So the next property you show, you're going to benchmark it off the last one.
Right.
So you're funneling the properties that get more and more specific. And then you narrow it down with the client to 2 or 3 the best ones that they like, the best ones. And then you analyze those even more. You know, if it's an investment, first-time home buyer, say where the value's at, based on the area. Is the area growing? What are rents? If they decide to rent it, if they decide to sell it, what are projections? And based on that, they'll make a decision based on the final 2 or 3. Because I feel, especially millennials, they can't decide if you give them too many options. Even 2 or 3 maybe. So as a professional,
I only want 3 options.
Yeah. So the best, I mean, they'll see more than 3.
Yeah.
But you slowly, as you see properties, you start funneling down and getting more and more specific. And that's going to save the client a lot of time.
Yeah.
It's going to save a lot of headaches because you're not showing properties they don't want. And every time you show them a new property, it's getting closer and closer to their needs. Like sometimes it takes longer, and that's where the BRA, the Buyer's Representation Agreement, has to be extended longer, because if you're looking for a specific property that's not available, I'm only going to be showing a property maybe once every 2 weeks, once every month, if it only becomes available then. But as a client, you have to be ready to jump on it, because the fast deals, you know, the good deals, they go fast.
It's funny, I've actually heard, you know, people describe their purchase of buying a house as like kind of like going on a roller coaster ride, where they're standing in line and there's like anxiety and excitement and it's about to happen, and then they sit down, they have their, you know, buckle down, and then it's this like crazy ride. They don't even know what happened, and then they're off and they own a house on the other side. I'm sure that that's sometimes what happens, right?
Sometimes, yeah. You have to coach them pretty much through. At the beginning, they have to know exactly what they're going to expect.
Right.
But sometimes it comes to the end, and if they're ready, and you kind of sometimes have to push them like onto the ride and make sure that they're going to be able to enjoy that ride. Because sometimes people will just stand, you know, at the front of the line and not get in on the ride and then miss out, especially, you know, with the market. If the market keeps going out, you can certainly miss out.
That's where I think it's so critical and important that you're spending time talking to people up front and really building that relationship and really making sure that what you're looking for is in fact right for them. I mean, it can be very scary. It's the largest purchase of your life for most people, right? So
it's extremely important.
Totally understand that.
So they have to understand, as a client, if you look at your realtor, you have to know they're a professional. You have to know they're thorough, they're knowledgeable. But you have to be able to trust them. Without trust, nothing's going to happen, because you have to believe that they're pretty much just an extension of you, and they're representing your best interests. And if
that makes it sound very scary. I gotta choose my extension of me.
Yeah. So if you ever feel that they're not representing you to the best standard that you would represent yourself, just part ways and take some time or look at other options.
Yeah. And you know, one of the things that I know you and I have chatted about before is the kinds of questions that you should be asking of your realtor when you first meet them. Because I know a lot of people are like, oh, I went to an open house, this lady smiled at me, that makes her a good realtor. No, that doesn't mean that she is a good negotiator, doesn't mean that she can handle your personality type. So really asking a lot of questions in advance to understand like their style and their statistics. I mean, you said something interesting when we first were starting talking here. It's just about that you want to work with a realtor who is a full-time realtor. Like somebody who does like 1 or 2 deals a month. They're probably not that knowledgeable, not on top of things. You know, it could be like your next door neighbor's best friend's sister, you know? So there's a lot of people like, oh, I don't need a realtor. I know somebody, I went to high school with them.
Right, and I mean, a lot of people, they tell me, you know, I like you, but I have a family member, so I'm going to use them. And that's fine. You have to understand, at the end of the day, it's your biggest purchase. And you want to make sure whoever represents you, they're going to be a professional. And if that's an individual that's only selling, you know, their cousin's home and, you know, their neighbor's home, that's not an individual that's committed. So anybody that's not full-time, it means they're not serious.
Well, what would you say is full-time? Like, if I were to ask you, I mean,
it's
you don't have to say right now.
It's pretty much the only thing that they're doing. They're making a living off it. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to see their face everywhere. but you have to know that they're active. Because
a lot of people
make, let's say, $100,000, but then they spend $100,000 on, you know, advertising. So the smart, a way to find out is make sure they're full time and just ask them questions. Like if you go look at properties with them and they're seeing a property and next door you see another house for sale or a house sold, you should ask them, what did that sell for? When did it sell? If they can't answer their questions, it's showing you they're not active and they don't really understand the area. Right. That's why it's one thing is make sure they're full time. Make sure they're specific. They know the area, not the specific street or even part of town, but make sure that where they're selling and where they're representing buyers is in that particular area. So they're an expert.
I love that. That's perfect. We're going to work with experts, full-time experts.
And also make sure that,
but we're not going to be biased. If their face is on a bus,
if you're going to go steady, you know, you have to make sure that your personalities match.
Because
if you can't, you know, stand the person, it's
it can be really high pressure. It's like, what are you going to do, you know? And if it's somebody who's got a very different personality style to you, maybe you like to see a lot of data and statistics. Maybe the person that you're working with isn't as data focused. So, you know, it's even about your style makes sense as well.
And also as a realtor, you have to cater to your different clients because
for sure,
some people want to see the turning property, some people don't. So you have to cater to that, but you got to make sure you're always giving them information the way they want it, and just making sure the most important thing is the trust factor. Making sure you never lose that.
Totally. So let's say you've taken someone out to see, I don't know, anywhere from 3 to 20 properties. They found the one they want to put in an offer. How does that work? What tools do you provide them with? How do you either suggest or guide them on the offer price? Maybe tell me a little bit about that part of the process.
Right. So I get a lot of clients, specifically millennials. That's, you know, this home it's listed for $499. So I want to offer $490, even though that may be a marketing tactic by the listing agent where the home is really valued at $700 or $750. So if you're going to tell your client, yeah, you know what, just offer that and then we'll see where it goes, you're really lying to them because they have no chance of obtaining that home at that price. So as an agent, you have to be knowledgeable and tell them exactly. You have to give them breakdowns, and I just pull out my iPad and I show, look, these homes are exactly the same. They sold within the last 3 months. And they sold for this range. So you're always going to give your client a range of where the value is at.
Yeah, and that's the comparables sold, so they can see what else is comparable and how much is actually sold for. Because actually what I've seen, unfortunately, some realtors do is show how much it was listed for in an attempt to get their clients to bid more.
Yeah, it's never go off.
No sneakiness.
Never go off listings. Always off sales.
Off sales. Okay.
If it's a big market within the last 3 months, if it's a smaller market, 6 months, sometimes up to a year, really depending what market you're at. The smaller, the longer you have to look back if there's no comparables. But it's always off the sale, and then you have to look at the pictures, and especially if this is where a professional agent comes into play because. If they know the area, most likely they would have been in that home. So just going off pictures is one thing, but being in that home and knowing the home that it sold, it's better to make a comparison. So it's like that one had an extra washroom, so that's why it sold for maybe $5,000, $10,000 more. So you start doing a comparison analysis and telling them, and you pretty much give them a range of where the value is at and what it would probably sell for, or maybe not sell, but where the value at least is. So you know if you're buying it, you're protected because you're not overpaying. And the value's there.
So really your job from a pricing standpoint is to give them all of the data and kind of help them understand it.
Yeah, understand the data.
And then what is sort of the right range for them to put in an offer so that they get the property for, hopefully they get the property for the least amount but still within the range of what the seller will likely.
And that's the first step because a lot of what you should be doing is you should be proactive as an agent. You should be speaking to the listing agent. And the good thing is realtors love to talk, so the most information you can get from the other side, I would suggest, you know, that's going to help your client. So if you know that they're motivated sellers and they already purchased a home, they have to close by a certain day, you know where the market value is at, but that's going to put you to the lower end or even lower, you know, especially if you could come with terms that are favorable to them, because it's not always just about price.
Yeah.
It's sometimes, you know, people really need closing within 30 days, and if you can do that, you'll get it $50,000 cheaper. So
right.
there are
what are
instances.
Some of the other terms that you maybe see or use once in a while to try to help offset the price one way or the other?
Right, so as we previously spoken, a main one would be focusing on closing. Especially if you know if there's, let's say, a divorce situation or the carrying cost or they're going bankrupt, they're trying to avoid that. If you can close quick, you're able to reduce the price. Another one is in a hotter market is if you go firm, and that's removing the more conditions you can remove off the offer, the higher probability.
Technically, the better.
Technically,
for the seller.
Yeah. So if you could go in firm, if you have a pre-approval and you're okay with removing the financing clause, if you get the seller, let's say if it's a condo, if you get the seller to send you the status certificate, which is the condition of the condo beforehand, and you review that or have a lawyer review that, you can remove that.
So that's really about the market itself, because I would say, and I think you'd probably agree, is if you can include those conditions as a buyer, you're more protected.
Definitely.
But I understand, like, you know, there's been some crazy hot markets. Vancouver is one, Toronto is one, where it's like there's like 25 offers within half an hour, $50,000 to $100,000 over, and like there's no hope of ever getting the property if you like financing and insurance and home inspection and you want 2 weeks. Like, I get it, you're going to be out of luck in that scenario. But
yeah, and I think with the market rates going up, the market's changing a bit. I think it's going to be national, and properties, once it starts shifting to a buyer's market, properties are gonna be on the market for longer.
So we have a bit more luxury of time then.
So you have more luxury, more time, you're going to have more properties to choose from, and you're not going to have to waive your conditions. You'll be more protected as a buyer.
Yeah, no, well, that sounds good as a buyer. It sounds like a good time to get in. So if you've now guided them, you know, put in an offer, tell me a little bit about the deposit and what you recommend. And I'm going to preface this by saying that, you know, obviously different markets are different, but I've heard a lot of the times that realtors will try to, not all, but some realtors may push their client to put a larger deposit, maybe $25,000, maybe $20,000, maybe even higher. And I've heard, again, through the grapevine, so I'm interested in your take, whether you've heard this in your colleagues or your industry, that part of the reason why there's often an ask for a higher deposit is because at the end or at the sale, there's a greater likelihood that they will get paid faster. Does any of that ring a bell for you?
Well, I'm going to say one of the major reasons that people request a higher deposit in hotter markets, it's custom to put 5% down, which is pretty big, because I know smaller markets, some people just put $1,000, a couple $100. Yeah. But depending on the market you're at, this is where your realtor as a professional is going to tell you exactly what's custom, and if you have the funds, what it just tells the buyer and the listing agent, the seller and the listing agent, is if you could come up with a huge deposit within a few days, they know that you're more serious, you're more likely to close, you're not going to be scrounging for money or financing. So it just shows that you're more serious. Now, in regards to getting paid on the realtor side, I necessarily haven't seen that. I think it's more of, in a harder market, like there's something called appraisal risk, where, like you said, people bidding over asking price, over market value. A lot of the times, the home may only be worth $700,000, but people are paying $800,000, and the bank isn't going to lend for $800,000. They're only going to lend a percentage of the market value. So this means that the buyer has to come up with a difference. So I have to put more down. So the larger the down payment that you're putting down, it reduces that assessment risk.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, that makes sense. And I think that that's something that's also very specific to the market that you're dealing with, and like how long the property is in fact on the market for.
Definitely.
You know, probably if there's lots of bids and it's going really quickly, then it can make sense to put in a larger offer again to show that you are more serious. But
Definitely.
You know,
but it all depends on the market. And if you're like in a smaller market, in a rural market, just speak with your agent, because it may be custom that they only put $500, $1,000, $5,000, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
If you're in a market where they are not required to put more down, because that money is going to be held in trust. So you want to make sure that whatever money you're putting down, you're not going to need within the next 30 days because it may be held in the listing agent's brokerage's trust for longer than that. So you...
Okay, so no, you're absolutely right. You just kind of hit something for me. And that is, who in your, I'm not going to say in your opinion, but maybe like your experience with the industry holds the deposit. And I'll tell you why I asked this question is because, you know, I've definitely been in a scenario. I put a deposit in on a property and it went to the seller's listing brokerage, and then they did a home inspection and it didn't pass. There were all kind of trauma with the house. So because I had the condition, I backed out, and then even though the contract said you get your money back within 3 business days, it literally took almost a month because someone was on vacation and then somebody was sick, and there was all these kinds of excuses. So I was really upset, and so every single time that I've bought a property since then, I have requested, and it's always been accepted, I'm not saying that's going to be the norm, that I put my deposit with my lawyer and not with either of the brokerages. Have you seen that? Like, I know it's not industry.
It's not as custom that happened, but you can request it and you can obtain that, and I think we've previously spoken on this.
Yeah.
It's very custom for investors because you don't want especially if you're buying an investment property, you don't want your money tied up. But it's good to have the options. If you want to make sure that if you're putting the money down and you need it within 30 days, and if you're going to back out, that there's no issues, that's one way definitely of getting around it.
Okay.
So that's very, very smart.
Well, you know, what's it say? Like, once bitten, twice shy is the expression. You know, if you get burned, you kind of look for a different alternative. Okay,
fool me once.
Yeah, there you go. Wait, what's it? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. There we go. Anyways, we're getting all these crazy colloquials out. But okay, so that's really helpful. Now, let's say we put in an offer and we do have conditions. What role do you play in terms of what needs to be done to remove the conditions? Do we have to sign more paperwork with you once we remove the conditions? Like, maybe just talk a little bit about that part of the process.
Right. So, if the major condition is going to be financing, or you're doing a home inspection. So, but if the home inspection is done, I have to be there. And then if everything's okay in the inspection, and you decide to waive that, you pretty much just have to sign a waiver. And pretty much what is called going firm is pretty much removing all the conditions and closing on the property.
So once you remove the conditions, is your job done? Like, what happens? Like, do you sort of...
No, then, I mean, all the paperwork we need to get together and go to the lawyers.
Yeah.
Now, with I work, I have a concierge service, like I have a representative that takes care of all the paperwork.
Right.
Now, if there's any issues, the clients are still going to come to the realtor because that's a point of contact.
Right.
That's who they know.
Yeah. And I think this is where I've heard just some like misunderstanding of expectations. They're like, you know, I've had people say, oh, you know, we removed all the conditions, and then I had to scramble to do all this stuff, and my realtor was nowhere to be seen. But like, well, your job is technically done at that point, or is it?
No, it's not. I mean, you still want to make sure that it closes and you're assisting your client till the end, and even after you're building a relationship. That it's even some people, you know, will end there, which is wrong. Some people will end when it closes and never talk to their client again, which is wrong too. You want to build a relationship.
I want a birthday card every year.
Make sure everything's okay. Make sure if they have any questions, they can call you.
Yeah.
But if you just need a system, you just want to make sure that it doesn't necessarily have to be the realtor that's going to assist you, but you have to make sure that you're not in the dark.
Right.
So if they have a representative assisting them, they're the ones that are going to be calling you, emailing you, telling you exactly what is needed, who you need to be in contact with, the deadline date, so you know exactly what's happening. And if you have any questions, always reach out to your realtor. They shouldn't have any issues. If they're not the ones to deal with it, as a professional, they're going to know who to forward you to and who's going to resolve that issue. So definitely streamlining and making the home buying process, you know, the most headache-free as it can be, because it's still going to be a little bit of a headache, and I think it should be because it's a big purchase. You want to make sure you're very thorough. So yeah, but just make sure they have the systems in place that are going to help you. If it's not them per se, it's going to be their assistant that's going to help you. Okay,
cool. That helps. So let's talk about how a realtor gets paid. Now, I'm going to preface it by saying I know that in every province across Canada, or not every provinces, but provincially, there are differences in the way that you're paid. So maybe we can just talk about, or the percentage changes by province is what I should say. So maybe we can talk a little bit about Ontario. What happens in a typical purchase if there's 2 realtors? How does the percentage get split? Who actually pays for it?
Right, okay.
How does that work?
So the commission paid is always paid by the seller.
Okay.
So the listing representative is going to indicate what that percentage is going to be, and then they could split it in any amount they want. Now what's custom is 5%.
Okay.
And then it's split 2.5 each ways.
So 2.5 for the realtor on the buying side?
2.5 for the brokerage.
Oh, the broker. Oh, you don't get all that money yourself?
No, they think we do. So it's like you're getting a lot of money, but really it's one brokerage to another brokerage, and then from those splits, they split it more into the agent on both sides. Now, it's really up to the seller. The seller may say, I only want to pay 3% commission and split that, or I want to go with the, let's say I want to go with these brokerages that only offer 1%, and then you're offering 0.5% or 1%. So the way that you're getting paid is always, it's based on the listing. It's going to indicate exactly what percentage you're going to be paid, and that could range from $0 all the way, and negotiable with the seller.
Right.
And it's negotiable. It could be 3, 4. As high I've seen as 3 or 4%.
Right.
On one side.
Okay, but typically it would be 2.5 for each side.
Typically it's 2.5 for each side.
And it is the seller who's responsible for making the payment for the buyer's realtor and brokerage firm.
That's
right?
correct, yes.
Okay. So if I am a buyer, technically I am not like taking any money out of my pocket to pay you, technically.
Right, like I know why you're saying technically, and it's true, you're not paying anything out
I'm
of
not
pocket.
trying to pull the wool over everyone's eyes, but I want to be clear.
So I know we're dealing with buyers here, but you have to understand the other side, so you know exactly where the money's coming from. So when a seller picks a realtor, and a realtor says, I'm going to charge 5%, they have to convince them and prove that by charging the 5%, what they're going to sell the home for is at least 5% or more. Because if they're going to market it properly, if they're going to stage it, if they're going to do canvassing, if they're going to door knock, if they're going to contact other realtors and be productive and get that home to sell for a higher amount, they're going to ask for 5%. Now, normally that 5%, they're going to add it, a lot of times they add it on top of what the value of the home is or what the home previously sold. A lot of times they just benchmark off the last previous comparable sale, and then they look, okay, that was 3 months ago, the market went up 5%, let's list for 5% more. So as a buyer, you don't pay necessarily out of pocket, but a lot of times it is added to the sale price, and that's where having a buyer's agent on your side that can negotiate is going to save you more money. So it's not, and it's...
And by no means am I suggesting here that you should not have a realtor to save a few $1,000s. Like, this is the biggest purchase of your life. Like, do not try to DIY this. That is definitely not my suggestion, but I think that it's important that people understand how the fee is in fact comprised. And you know what you were saying before, Ricardo, is like, your job is to negotiate on the buyer's behalf. That's your sole responsibility.
Yeah, and that's where you save the most money if you're a good negotiator. Because sometimes people, if it's a seller or the buyer, they're saying, I'm not going to use a realtor that's representing me because I'm going to go to the listing agent, and then I know the seller's going to save $5,000 because they don't have to pay commission, and the listing agent may get a little bit more, so I'm gonna save. But really, what you have to look at is the end value, what you're paying for, either on the buyer or the seller side. At the end of the day, for the buyers, what are you paying, and for the sellers, what is going in your pocket after paying all the fees. And if you're with a knowledgeable realtor, they should command, based on their knowledge, if they're charging you a fee or if they're representing you on the buyer's side, they're going to work for your best interests on both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so critical. So let's talk about double-ending deals, where it's the same realtor on the buyer side and the seller side. So typically it's, I walk into a house, I don't have a realtor, and there's one on the listing side there, and they end up representing both. Do you think that's a good idea? Like, what are your thoughts on it?
Most of the times, and I know this has been in the news, and it may be a lot in the future, or there's going to be some changes coming up with that, because it's a lot of unethical realtors unfortunately giving the community of realtors a bad name because they're double-ending deals, because they're putting more money in their pocket, but it's at the expense of their seller because they're just showing them that offer first because it's the one that they're going to get paid the most on, which is unfortunate. And on the buyer side, for you guys, they're still going to make sure that they're going to charge you the most, because if they're making a percentage off the sale price, they're going to make sure that, and to make sure that the seller's going to accept your offer, they're going to make sure your offer is one of the highest, if not the highest.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the way I look at it, it's almost like they're representing nobody, and it's like you're watching a poker game and you're looking at everybody's cards and you're trying to like mix and match.
Yeah, there's definitely a conflict of interest. I mean, there's a small percentage that it may work out. Let's say you list a home and you have all these offers and you personally know a buyer, and you let all the other offers know that you have a buyer, so they know, and you tell the buyer, okay, this is where the value's at, whatever you want to offer. If they want to offer in the high end, as long as they know, as long as the buyer knows what they're putting in, and it's going to be higher than the other one, well, you can't tell them it's the highest, but let's say they want to offer on the high end and it gets accepted, they have to be aware of that. And the seller also has to be aware that you're also representing, even though you're representing them, you also have some representation to the buyer. So maybe you can cut the commission on the seller side, and that's the only way I see it.
That's how I see it could be
That's
fair.
the only small chance I can see could be fair, because the seller's going to save on some commission, the buyer's getting the home they want, and the listing agent is so it comes out to helping the seller and the buyer. You just have to make sure that your interest of getting more commission isn't the main focus why you're bringing the two parties together.
Yeah, no.
And unfortunately, most of the time, that's why they're bringing it together. So.
Yeah, and you know where I find that it happens the most, and I'm interested in your take, is when there is a realtor that specializes in like a building or 3-block radius, when they're like, I own this 3 blocks. If you want to buy or if you want to sell in these 3 blocks, I know the history, I know everybody who lives there, I know everything. And then I find they end up double-ending the deal a lot. You know, and you know, one of the things that I think is important to ask up front when you're working with a realtor is if, you know, you're going to end up in that kind of scenario, would you be willing to compromise a little bit on the commission, exactly like you had suggested?
Right, and see what they say. Besides that, I think you should just, personally, I would just want to represent one side, and you should just have a realtor represent one side. And that's why signing the buyer's representation agreement, you're making sure that they're representing you and only you.
I love that. So what are some of, I mean, we've talked about a few things, but what are some of the things that you have seen, maybe some of your fellow colleagues that maybe give you guys a bit of a bad rap that people should watch out for and not be like, oh, all realtors are this because I heard the story of that?
Well, realtors have a bad rap, and sometimes it's warranted. It's just one thing I would say is they're not really professional as the way they should be. They're not accountable, they don't work in their client's best interest, you can't get a hold of them. But the thing that's really scary and I think gives them a bad name, even compared to like used car salesmen, they
pretty bad.
Yeah, they pretty much used used car salesmen, lawyers, you know, pretty much real estate agents are up there as well. They have a bad name. It's pretty much being unethical. And a lot of times I speak, it works out for the buyers, but unfortunately for the sellers, they give you a lot of information because let's say, especially in a buyer's market, the home is sitting, the agents are going to give you a lot of information they're not supposed to, and they're not doing their clients the best service in that way. Now, the good thing is that your buyer, I mean, if they're giving you information, you're not doing anything wrong by listening to. But I think one thing is just I would suggest that realtors need to be more professional, and one way of doing that is making sure that realtors are only full-time. So what I would suggest personally would be that the fees to be a real estate agent yearly, increase that significantly. A lot of people say the fees are already $2,000–3,000 a year. Increase that, because if you're committed to the job, you're okay with paying that. And the entrance exams, there should be more difficult, because even I know this is Canada-wide, but even in the Greater Toronto area, over 30,000 realtors, and I mean most of them sell 0 to 2 properties on average. So they're not going to represent your best interest. They have other employment. So if you make the fees higher, and I think if you make the exams and you have to take examinations and be concurrent and keep taking the exams, and
it'll raise the bar.
It'll raise the bar, and I think it'll just keep the cream of the crop there. And
I think what you're suggesting
standard.
is maybe some questions that we've already talked about, but if you're looking to work with a realtor, really interview them, ask them how many deals they've done in the last year, ask them about their knowledge of the marketplace, ask them about, why a couple properties sold for the price that they did, ask them how many they've gone to preview before their clients, and I think, with honest answers on that, it'd probably be pretty quick to weed out who's maybe not as serious or professional.
Make sure you're just catching them off guard, which is a good thing.
Yeah,
if they're not answering a question, make sure, understand why they're not answering it. If they don't know, that's going to raise some red flags.
You've done great here. You've answered all my questions. So one last question for you is just, what are some of the mistakes that you see first-time home buyers making on a fairly regular or consistent basis? What are the most popular or likely traps that people fall into?
I would say you guys have to stop acting with emotion and buying properties based on pictures just because it looks pretty. And when you get pre-approved, don't overextend yourself. If you're happy with a $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 home, and then you go to get qualified, and they say, hey, you can qualify for $5,000, automatically they throw their old expectations out the window, and like, I want to look at $5,000 now. You don't have to overextend yourself. You don't want to live in a property just because you can afford it, and then you're house poor, meaning most of your payment is going to the mortgage and to upkeep of the property. You still want to enjoy your lifestyle and have money to do other things, vacation, grow a family, whatever it may be, start a business. So definitely, I would say, people this day and age, just make sure that right off the bat you're not purchasing the highest property just because you can purchase that. Make sure you don't overstretch yourself, and also make sure if you do purchase something, you're buying within market value. That's where the realtor comes, and try to keep. I know some emotion will still go in because you want.
There will be a little bit.
No, there's still always emotion because you just walk into a place. Most people, they decide they like a place within the first 3 seconds of just walking in the home. It just makes you feel something. But make sure with a smart realtor on your side, they're going to make sure you definitely don't overpay on the property.
I love it. Thank you so much for being here. Really, really great tips. And you are available in what area to help first-time home buyers?
I specialize in the GTA, but like I said, my primary specialty is in Mississauga.
Mississauga, awesome. All right, well, we'll have his contact information below. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
All right.